All right, let's get started. So yesterday was count day. I was really impressed to see that most of you logged on and did the count day assignment. It's really appreciative. If you went in and completed the quiz, you got full points for that assignment. I wanted to make sure that it was worth your while to come in and complete that assignment to get the points or to be counted for the day. So even if you didn't answer all the questions correctly or to the best of your ability, you got full points for completing that assignment. So thanks for that. So last week, let's just do a little summary of what we talked about. We jumped into and we talked about bacteria and protists. That was great. Most of you already knew what bacteria were. And then protists, we talked about kind of more on the algae side of things, something we might not have thought we had heard of before. But then when we talked about some examples, it really seemed that you guys knew I'm sorry, what we were talking about. This week, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about plants and fungi. We're also going to label the parts of the flower. So the assignments that you guys have due on Monday evening, you have the plants and fungi quiz, you have the plants and fungi discussion, and then you have the label the flower assignment. So with the label the flower assignment, I'm going to open this up for you. What you're going to do is you're going to click on this link right here, and it will take you to a separate web page. Let's do that just so you know what it looks like. You're going to click this start button here, and it's going to walk you through this. And it provides you, so it says right here that you have a nice little word bank here. So it says stamen, filament, anther, stigma, style, ovary, oval, and sepal, and you need to identify F. So you come in here and you see the F is pointing here, and then you have to go in down here and type of these words what you think that is. Something they didn't include was the word petal, but obviously down in here for J, you're going to need to know that it's a petal. So please keep that in mind when you're doing this. There's 15 questions, as you can see right here. Whoop. So please make sure you complete all 15 questions. When you're done with it, and I'll show you Jasmine's because she did a fantastic job on it, you're going to screenshot your screen, and it's going to provide you with this lovely certificate here. And then you're just going to insert that screenshot of your certificate as a picture on that other document that I left there. So it's that simple. I just need to see how you did, and then I'll give you points accordingly based on how you performed on that. Then the next two things, obviously the quiz and then the discussion question. But how can you do the quiz unless we get started on this information? Sorry about that. One more thing. Next week we have animals. One thing I have already done for you though is I've already released the Unit 4 review, because not next week but the week after that. We have our first test of this semester. So I've already released that Unit 4 for review, so you guys can get started working on that. If you go in here, oh, it doesn't appear to be, I'll fix that for you. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it goes to this FlippityNet link, and in here, the FlippityNet, if it loads, takes a minute sometimes. Anyways, in this FlippityNet, there's different flashcards. There's a matching game. Here's the flashcards. You can also use the list view where it lines up the question and then the answer. There's a matching game where you get to pick like non-vascular. And the great thing about this one is that you know that the blue cards match up with the blue, and the green matches up with the green, red with the red, and yellow with the yellow. So that helps to make it a little easier. There's a practice where you can write in your answers. And then there's just, a little bit more information. But the flashcards and the matching are a great way to study for your test. Okay? Because your test, again, will be in 2 weeks. So with that being said, let's get started talking about plants and fungi. There are, before I get started, I just want to clarify, there are so many slides. There are like 50 some slides on this. But we're just going to breeze through quite a bit of them. I just wanted you to have the information just because I find these two kingdoms so fascinating. So the first thing we're going to talk about is fungi. We're going to talk about the characteristics, the evolution, and something else. Okay, so this is just kind of like a nice little tree. As you can see down here, we have the ancestral eukaryotes, and then it branches off from here. So if we take a look, we're going to go over to this branch because that's where we talk about most of our kingdoms. And you come over and we got this red algae here. So that must mean, hey, that's a protist, right? Yes. Okay. So it's right in there, that category. And then we see this plantae. So that means that's plants. And then we see fungi all the way over here next to Animalia. So with that being said, they, as much as fungus looks like plants, they're very similar to animals because they have closer branches together. Like plants and fungi, they branch all the way down here and connect, whereas fungi and animals branch all the way up here. So they're very closely related, and that's something we'll consider as we move forward with this. So, some of the characteristics of fungi, they're unicellular, but they can also be, as you can see down here, multicellular. So they have, there's fruiting body of mushrooms which shows that they're also multicellular. So there's two different kinds there. Something to keep in mind for your quiz. They're filamentous. They have tube-like strands. They called hyphae, and then they also have mycelium, which is it's that's kind of like their roots, and it's again another form of hyphae, which we'll see here in a minute, a picture. There's some hard parts on fungi. It's called sclerotronium. It's a hardened mass of mycelium that generally serves as an overriding stage. Okay, so again, we got the fruiting body up here on the top, nice and see, and then you have this mycelium down here, kind of like the roots. It's called mycelium, but I'm going to, just for your reference, as you can see it here in this, mass right down here, this is what it looks like underground. But they're both made of hyphae, okay? Both made of hyphae, something to consider, something to know for your quiz. One characteristic of fungi is they practice heterotrophy, which means they need other food. They need to go out and find food or absorb food to survive. So you have the cerebrobes, which feed on dead tissue or organic waste. So the cerebrobes are also called decomposers. We also have the symbionts, which create multiply beneficial relationships between fungus and other organisms. And then you also have parasitic fungi, just like you have parasitic bacteria. And these parasites are diseases, and we call them pathogens. Okay. So when you have heterotrophic fungi, they're going to get their carbon from other organic resources. So when you have dead, decaying leaves, you have dead and decaying animals. This is where the fungus comes into play, and they use their hyphal tips to release enzymes, and it starts to break down the substance. And then the products are then diffused back into the hyphae to help it absorb. Okay, so there goes the enzymes. They get the products then diffuse back into the hyphae. There you go. All right, so what about the hyphae? It's tubular. It's got a hard wall of chitin on the outside, and then there's many cross walls that form compartments. And then again, it can also be multicellulate. Okay, so that makes it really easy for this to go and absorb food from decomposing organisms and then bring it back into the rest of the fungus. They grow, extend from their tips, just as like a plant leaf would or something like that. The mycelium, those root type things we talked about, they're very extensive and they go well and deep into the soil. And they're really, really helpful for making sure that we constantly have that overturn of, helping with the decomposition of dead leaves and soil and, dead organisms, animals, plants, etc. So these are some sarbrobes or decomposers. Mold is one, as you can see here. This is the inside of a house, which is really, really scary. And then you have probably either there's a bathtub or something up here. Then it got wet, and now there's mold growing. Okay, so what it's actually doing is decomposing that wall, is what that mold is doing there. You can also see it on the bread and then on this fruit here as well. Okay. You also have the symbionts or mutualism types of fungi. So you have these lichens. These are one of Miss Marchand's favorite organisms, but they sit on wood or they sit in the grass or in forests, and they're actually very helpful to the other organisms around them. Okay, yeast, this black yeast over here, again, also helpful to the other organisms around it. Okay. And then you have mycorrhizas, which is another type of mutualism. It's called fungal roots, and it helps plants uptake more material that they need, helps them get more water, more nutrients, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. This is just kind of what some of them look like. They almost look like, if you're looking at them, they almost look like they're plant cells. They've got those walls. These are chitin walls, but they almost look like they're like full cell walls, like plants. Lichens, again, I just think they're so cool. But they create mutualism. They have algae, cyanobacteria. There's 3 different types of lichens, and you'll need to know this for your quiz. You have the crustaceous lichens, which are flat and crusty form. You have the foliose lichens, which are leafy in appearance, and they almost seem like lobed or branched structures, but they're not real leaves. And then you have the fruitose lichens, which are even more finely branched and may hang down from like beards from different branches or tiny shrubbery as they grow. This is just the internal structure. Again, there's a lot of information in this slideshow, but I just wanted you to have it in case you were interested. Okay. Then there's parasitic fungi or pathogenic fungi. So here you can see it's attacking someone's face. That's not great. This is ringworm. So ringworm is actually a type of parasitic fungi. And then up here you can see like it attacks different plants. It makes it so they're unable to grow. Same here with like some type of pine tree here. All different kinds of fungus there. Fungi are spore-cific. That's a joke, but they produce spores, and that's how they reproduce. They can reproduce asexually, or they can reproduce sexually. It just depends on how the cells divide and the way the spores develop, depending on what kind of fungus it is. The purpose of the spores allow the fungi to move to a new food source, so that the spores can literally float through the air, and they can move on to a new, set of tree, or even further down to a new forest, just caught by the wind, or riding on the back of an animal, or however they make it through the forest. They are very resistant, and it allows fungi to survive in very, very cold winters, like we have here in Michigan, or very, very hot places as well. This also helps to introduce new genetic combinations throughout their population. Okay, so a little bit more about how they reproduce, but truly just know that they reproduce by spores. Fungus is often hidden from view. It grows through its food source, and then it secretes extracellular digestive enzymes and absorbs and dissolves food. It has indeterminate colonial growth. It has a vegetative phase of fungi is generally sedentary. It doesn't move once it's to where it needs to go. Okay? It has a cell wall. Its food storage is generally in the form of lipids and glycogen. It is a eukaryote. We knew that, but just so in case you didn't, it is a eukaryote. All fungi requires oxygen and water, hence why they're so closely related to animals. Okay, there are no anaerobic fungi. Okay. Then we also, this is just kind of the generalized life cycle of fungi. Again, biggest thing you guys need to remember is that they're specific and that they reproduce through their spores. Okay. Different types of fungi here. So you have the motile spores, the xenosporic ones, the SA and the bacillus. Again, too much information, but I just wanted you to have it in case you needed it. The citrids are a simple type of fungi that are typically in water. They're the most motile type of fungi, and they're typically decomposers, or some of them are parasites. Okay, then you have the zygote fungi, which zygote makes sense because that's typically in sexual reproduction. And you'll see this on things like strawberries, and then sometimes you have asexual reproduction as well. They don't have, these hyphae don't have any cross walls, so they are able to grow really rapidly. And you see these as typically decomposers or pathogens. You have the sac fungi, so you can see they almost look like they have little sacs, little like balls of stuff. And they're very important plants and parasites Again, they're decomposers. This is what yeast looks like because it needs that breakdown to create that gas when we're creating things like bread. Okay, and then you have different, things that sac fungi can look like as well. So then you have this club fungi. Just a little bit of information about that. Yeast, again, used for making bread, but it's a type of fungus. Okay. Then you have mold, which you see on fruit, you see in your house, you see a little bit of everywhere. And it just, kind of rapidly grows. There's asexual spores. And it's very important for humans to know about this because it is really related in how to preserve food and also in food spoilage. Okay. And there's also different types of mold that we use to create some of the medicines that we have, like penicillin. It's produced from mold. So we use that to actually help us and heal us from some bacterial infections that we can get. So again, some of the benefits of fungi for human interaction helps to decompose nutrients and put them back in for carbon recycling. Biosynthetic factors can be used again to reproduce drugs, antibiotics, alcohol, acids, food, different fermented products, not to mention we eat mushrooms. And then you have model organisms for biochemical and genetic studies. Some of the harmful effects of fungi to humans, they can obviously deconstruct our food, our lumber, our paper, our cloth, our homes, depending on what it is. They can create harmful diseases to animals and humans. They have toxins that can be released and also create plant diseases. So there's, like with everything, there's kind of a nice balance of things that can be useful for and things that are harmful. It's just a matter of balancing between the two. All right, now let's talk about plants. Okay, here's just that didn't turn out. That's just a kind of a evolutionary tree for plants, kind of the way it looks. So what do we know about plants? So they're eukaryotic again. Okay, so plants and fungi both eukaryotic. Let's keep that in mind. Okay, they're called the Plantae kingdom. Their cell type eukaryotic. They're multicellular. There's no exception. They're all multicellular. Most of them are autotrophic, which means they go through photosynthesis to feed. And then for reproduction, they follow sexual reproduction because they use seeds. Okay. It is believed that plants evolved from green algae, i.e. protists. So we think that plants evolved from protists, which are can be single-celled or can be multi-celled organisms, just because they have a lot of the same classifications. First and foremost, plants are classified in two different ways. You have the non-vascular plants, and then you have the vascular plants. So the non-vascular plants are the short plants with no transport tissue, i.e. things like moss. And then you have the vascular plants, which are the taller plants, the trees, the flowers, etc. Some of them have xylem, which are veins for water, and then they also have the phloem, which are the veins for food. Okay, then you kind of have everything you've got going on here. You've got the trees on this side, and then you've got some algae and some brophytes and some ferns on this side. So again, non-vascular plants, just so you can see it. You've got the ancestral green algae down here. Coming into these, the non-vascular plants come into mosses and liverworts and hornworts, and then on the vascular side, you've got ferns, you have conifers, which are pine trees, and different flowering plants. Okay. So let's go back to this for a second. So we started from protists or green algae, and we somehow, like, the mosses make sense. Moss, typically you find it near water at least, but how did we go from this green algae that needs to live in water to these big trees, which still need water, but they're very on the land and don't need to be directly next to water? Well, this is what happened. The cells started to adapt root systems. They have shoot systems, which allow them to transport the nutrients and water they get from their roots up to the extending parts of their leaves and their stems and everything like that. They also have vascular tissue, and they also have a waxy cuticle. So the waxy cuticle, that step right there, creates that outer and protective layer to protect them from the weather. Okay. And then we have some traits of seed-bearing plants. So They have pollen grains. They arise from megaspores. Again, spores, kind of like fungi, but a little bit different. But they have megaspores, which can develop into male gametes. They can be transported without water. So pollen can go through the air. They can go on bees. They can go on a leaf. They can just kind of everywhere. They can go on the bottom of your shoe. Pollen can be transported anywhere. Seeds are embryosporific, and they're inside. They have nurtured tissues and also a protective coat. And these can withstand most hostile conditions. So sometimes people plant and bulbs are a little bit different, but they plant bulbs in the fall, or even pine trees, for instance. They drop their pine cones in the fall, and then they withstand the whole winter, all the harsh, wind and the rain and the snow, all winter long. And then in the spring, a flower or a tree will pop up. And that's because these seeds can withstand those very hostile conditions. The vascular plants can be further classified as gymnosperms, cone-bearing plants, that's the pine tree, and then angiosperms, the flowering plants. Okay, so the angiosperms are classified into the monocots, which are flowering plants with a parallel veins and petals, i.e. something like a tulip. They have petals of 3. Okay, so something like a tulip. And then you have the dicots, which have multiple petals, so something like a rose. Regardless of the type, flowers are great for sexual reproduction, obviously, because they have that pollen, and they, just because they're so brightly colored, they really attract those insects to help move. Even if a skunk comes along and he puts his nose into a flower, and then he walks over to another flower, he moves that pollen from one flower to another to help with that reproduction and create more. We should know this, but just in case you don't, the way plants get their food is that they go through photosynthesis. Plant cells produce their own food through a process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis allows for plants to convert light energy into food energy using their chloroplasts. Okay. We'll talk more about photosynthesis here in a couple weeks. We have a whole unit, not a whole unit, but at least a week on photosynthesis. So we'll talk more about that then. This is one of your projects that you guys have to do this week, your assignment. So you guys need to make sure that you know both of the male and female parts of the flower. So obviously we have the petals up here. They're nice and easy to see. Down here we have this receptacle. This little green petal-ish thing is called a sepal. Okay, your female parts are going to be over here. So all the way inside you have the oval. The big thing surrounding it is the ovary. So all the way inside is the oval, and outside is the ovary. All of the female parts are called the pistil. All of the male parts are called the stamen. So more parts of the female, you have the style, which goes up, and then at the very top, the stigma. The stigma is where the pollen is going to come, okay, inside, and then help to reproduce with the flower, okay? On the male side, we have the filament, and then at the top of the filament, you have the anther. Okay, so the anther is typically where the pollen is found. It gets on a bee or something. The bee comes and lands on the stigma, and then the flower can then reproduce. Okay, flowers have mutualistic and symbiotic relationships with pollinators, again, like bees, other insects, and birds. Plants attract them with their petals. They create nectar for the pollinators to eat, and then in return, the pollinators carry the pollen to the other plants. This is kind of a long plant cell. So what you have looking at here, you have the nucleus over, sorry, this is bad imagery, but the nucleus is actually right here. These big things in the middle are vacuoles. This part right here is the cytoplasm surrounding this. The chloroplasts are these dark things, which would typically be green. The cell wall is this very outer edge, and then inside the cell wall, you can see that you have this cell membrane in between there. That's just the basic of a plant cell. The rest of the plant cell looks very much like a eukaryotic cell that we discussed in the first semester. Then you have the bryophytes, which are small, non-vascular, and non-woody plants. They are leaf-like. They have stems and they have root-like parts. They typically live in wet habitats. They also have flagellated, like we learned about last week, okay, sperm, which require water to reach eggs. So it's very important to know, okay? Then we also have the moss life cycle here, and we're not going to focus on this a lot, but I just wanted you guys to kind of see what it looks like. So mosses, on the other hand, they're typically kind of ground coverings, maybe side of the tree covering. They have consist of a leafy shoot that is anchored by a substrate of branches called the multicellular rhizids. Okay. They also can create this leafy arrangement, which is normally spiraled. In the initial stage of the development of these gametophytes, it's this spore generation for these mosses. Moss is highly branched with sporophytes, terminating lateral branches. And these are just a few different kind of mosses here. Sporophyte is one you're going to want to remember for your quiz, I think. A habit of shot with female shoots with terminal sporophytes and male shoots with the cluster of orange erythrid around the leaves. Okay, so that's just another type of moss there. And you can see it close up. Again, just another, this is how moss can be another life cycle. One moss I want you to remember is called liverwort. This one reproduces asexually. Okay. Something also to remember is that gametophytes are male or female, so they can be one or the other. And that is it. That is everything for plants and fungi this week. Okay. As always, reach out to me if you have any questions. I would love to help you guys. I want you to be successful in this class. You have my number. You have, please use the Google chat. Again, I always want you to be successful in this class, so please reach out to me if you have any questions, and I would love to see you at our next live lesson. Thanks.